to the last chapter from the book we're going to cover here, which is Module 11. And next week I'll do Velociraptor demos, and I'm not sure what I'll do for the last few classes. I'll let you know. But now we're going to do Mac forensics. So, let me make it bigger. All right. So Mac had an operating system that got very little respect from serious people. That was graphics only and stuff until they moved to OS 10. They had their own weird operating system that was kind of screwy, and everybody laughed at it. But OS 10 is based on BSD Unix, Berkeley Standard Unix from UC Berkeley, that is excellent. And after they switched to OS 10, Macintosh started advertising themselves as using the most advanced operating system in the world, and that is a reasonable statement. BSD Unix is arguably one of the earliest Unixes, one of the most well-developed and perfected, so they're not arguing with it. So they've had a lot of products all using it, Apple TV and Time Capsule and all kinds of things. Now they started with a flat file system from the 80s and really old file systems that were very limited, and then they moved to HFS and HFS Plus and JHFS Plus and many versions. This is equivalent to Microsoft's FAT and such. And then they moved to Apple File System, which is the modern one. 64-bit file system with a huge number of addressable blocks, timestamps stored in nanoseconds. A matter when you copy a file, it doesn't copy the contents twice. It's more efficient than that. And it has strong encryption, which is probably the most important thing for us in security. Everything is encrypted with versions of AES. And the AES is using 256-bit key, which is military grade. So that is very good. And they have layers of encryption. Key bags store encryption information. So you have a container key bag with a volume key bag and a volume encryption key, and then a key encryption key. And as you remember, we talked about this, I think, a while ago, the iPhone boot up process. There's several keys as you go through stages of boot up and several layers of encryption. They're really not messing around. So they have backup, escrow, iCloud backup, and user. When you enter your password, it loads various keys. And so now it has a T2 security chip, which is the equivalent of the trusted platform module in Windows machines. And this is a special chip to hold the keys, so that the keys are not anywhere in the namespace of the processor. It does the encryption. It's a cryptographic coprocessor, and it has what they call effaceable storage, which means it's easy to erase. And this is why you can, if you have encryption turned on right from the start, and you want to erase everything, all you do is delete the key, and now all that data is gone forever. This is how iPhones work, and you can do the same thing for other Apple devices. All right. It's got space sharing, allowing multiple file systems to share the same free space and stuff like that. Kind of goofy stuff. Doesn't really matter that much. So Spotlight is this feature up here. You can click this and then search for anything on the machine. Like if I want to do Activity Monitor, I can type it and it will pop up. This is very handy. It's vastly superior to Microsoft's search box. It doesn't work very well. It really works. It is very close to a Google search for the desktop that Google brought out for Windows XP that was like that. You could just type a couple of letters for anything you wanted and it would find it right away. That's nice. And it keeps an archive of what people have been doing. So that might be a good place to find things. They say you can't recover things that have been moved to the trash and deleted because it no longer maintains a link reference to that location. Now, I would think you could probably still recover the blocks out in storage and reconstruct them with a tool like Autopsy, but all the modern Macs run on SSDs, and most SSDs erase data a few seconds after it's deleted, so you probably won't be able to recover any significant amount of deleted files. It has journaling. All modern operating systems have this. This means whatever it's doing, it keeps a log of what it's doing, so that if the operating system crashes or the power goes out, halfway through an operation like a file copy, it doesn't corrupt the disk. When the power comes back, it looks at the journal and says, oh, I was up to block 10 of this file, I will just continue at block 11 and block 12, and it can usually continue things even when they get interrupted rudely. So a DMG file is an exact copy of a volume. The equivalent of a DDM, it's just a direct, this is what usually, Apple software usually comes in the form of a DMG file. And then you can make, in principle, there's a sparse image that can grow. All right. But DMGs, I mostly see them because you're installing software. It typically comes in the form of a DMG file. And you double-click it, and it mounts like a drive, and then you run an installer in there. Now, Macs do not have the registry. Remember, the registry is the binary database storing all the settings for applications in the operating system. Instead, what they have is plist files. They're closer to the way Linux does it. In Linux, you install a program like Apache, and it has configuration files. Then you install some other program, and it has its own configuration files, and they're not all correlated. And the same thing here. You'll have plist files or property list files that store information about a part of the operating system or part of an application. They are binary files, although if you just print them out, a lot of it is readable. But if you use the PL util, it can format them nicely and make them easier to read. It's got a sleep image file, which is like Windows Hyper file for hibernation, storing the contents of RAM, so if the power goes out, it can put the RAM back. And so it's been around for a long time, and here's some security features. Gatekeeper enforces code signing for downloaded apps. If you buy a new Mac, you cannot install random software you find on the web. You can only install stuff that comes from Apple Store. It's signed by Apple, just like an iPhone. Now you can turn that off, and most people do pretty fast because they want to use utilities. File Vault is the encryption tool. Disk utility is used to format disks and repair them and so on. The macOS keychain is the password manager in macOS, which is very effective, and if you have an iPhone, it will automatically synchronize with your iPhone, and you'll have your passwords on all your devices. That's the iCloud keychain that stores it in the cloud. And you got Safari is the default browser, and usually the only browser people have on an iPhone, and it's got the usual thing. The browsing history is in a plist file and the downloads file, and there's a cache with the database with browsing history and images and such. Very much the same kind of thing you'd find at any other browser, just that's stored in plist files and a SQLite database. Let me check for comments. Okay, no new ones. All right, and then there's target disk mode, which is pretty amazing. If your disk is not password protected, you can hold down the option key at power on and use it as a USB hard drive, where it just connects the hard drive directly as just a storage device without running the operating system at all. And this is very handy to just copy all the data off it. So it's very nice. Then there's the mobile devices, which just have a somewhat shrunken version of the same operating system. And they're often interconnected and work together with other devices. This is one of the real reasons why people buy Macs. You get a Mac and an iPhone and other Apple devices, they all interoperate really well together. Microsoft has been talking about making your Android phone interact with Windows, but all the attempts to do this, they seem to get canceled. They don't seem to have gotten so far with it. So in iOS, your device is formatted with Apple FS. And again, everything is encrypted on an iPhone, modern iPhone, ever since the iPhone 3S. Everything's encrypted with 256-bit AES. It's got data protection, which generates a new key for the file. So there's quite a few layers of encryption. Each time a file is created, it encrypts the file. There's a USB mode to prevent a trusted computer from unlocking the iOS to make you re-enter the passcode. And every app is encrypted. The data is also encrypted. So it really is, they really put a lot of encryption on the iPhone. And it's really about the most secure computing platform that anybody uses these days is the iPhone. And a Mac is really very secure if you don't change any of the defaults, but most people do change the defaults to lower the security to install unapproved software on them, and then they're not as secure as the iPhone, where you can't really do that very well. So here's where things are stored on an iPod. You got where pictures are stored and contacts, calendars, more pictures down here, and so on. Sort of thing you'll find. On the iPhone, you've got a keyboard cache, which shows words you've typed for autocorrect, screenshots, current and deleted photos. I'm kind of question deleted photos. I don't know about that. It's like I say, it's rare to see an SSD device where you can really recover deleted stuff. I wonder how much you can actually recover. But you do have GPS information. And you have, now if you want to image your phone, you need special software or hardware, depending on how you buy it. Celebrite is the main leader, especially now that they brought BlackBag, but there's a lot of other devices out there that can sell you software or a combination of software and hardware, so you have a device to image a phone. All right, and there's a thing called direct firmware update mode or something like that, DFU mode, where you can install firmware onto a device like an Internet of Things device like we're about to talk about, and a recovery mode to restore settings to the original factory. This is what you do if your device is corrupted and it won't boot. Now, when the iPhone is powered on, it gets boot code from the ROM, and there's an Apple root public key here, which guarantees that the original bootloader is signed by Apple. Then iBoot begins and it verifies and mounts the iOS kernel, and there are more layers of encryption involved. Now, this was just verified again last week. If you use biometrics, like a thumbprint or a face print, then police are able to force you to provide that to unlock your phone, because the First Amendment protects you from speech, but that is not speech. Whereas if you use a password or a PIN, they cannot compel you to produce it. So that's an issue if you plan to try to avoid having the police search your device. There is an iPhone backup locally. Well, that's not done too often. Most people do iCloud. iCloud, Apple strongly encourages you to use iCloud because, of course, the number one problem with your phone is you're going to lose your phone or drop it, and then you're going to wish you had all your data, and so they try to encourage you to put all your data in iCloud so you can buy a new phone and put the data from iCloud back on it. But the iCloud data, Apple has the key to the encryption. They have to have it because they have to decrypt it to put it on your new phone, and so with a court order, you can subpoena the iCloud data. So most people that think they're keeping privacy on their phone data, they usually are not, at least as far as police go. The police can get at it if it's in iCloud. All right, and like I say, photographs often have geotagging, which puts the physical location in the metadata. And there are location services that give a lot of track of where this phone has been. And now there's Find My iPhone all the time to track down where it is physically. So that's extremely useful, of course. You can find out where people have been, and this is used for a lot of purposes. A pizza store used this to track where all their customers went on Sunday when they were shut. And they use it to see how fast the traffic is on the freeway by seeing how fast the phones are moving and stuff. This location data is just used for a lot of purposes with complete disregard for anybody's privacy, which there are no laws protecting in America. All right. Checkmate and CheckRain. Checkmate was invented by an ex-student of mine a few years ago. It was a vulnerability in the boot-up process of the iPhone that can be used to take over the phone and gets you up to, I think, iPhone 11, the hardware version 11, and CheckRain is the jailbreak based on it. So these are ways to let you make a full file system extraction on iPhones. So they're very useful for security researchers. There's a tool that pulls SQLite databases off the phone. And so to perform your Mac forensic examination, you have to understand which Mac you have and issues like encryption and secure boot and such. And then you try to get a DMG image of the Mac hard drive. Encryption is the biggest hurdle, though, of course. The whole point of it is to protect you. If you need to have the password to get in, or the PIN, or the face, or the thumbprint, and if you don't have that, you're usually not getting anything off the phone itself. This happened to the FBI. There's a phone of a terrorist, and they couldn't get in, and they took Apple to the Supreme Court demanding that Apple let them in, and then they just paid, supposedly, $1 million to Celebrite to buy the tool to get in. I don't know how much they really paid, but anyway, they just bought a tool to hack in. But there's no easy way in. All right, let me check for comments. All right, and then there is Internet of Things devices, which are everywhere. Now everything is smart. Refrigerator, the light bulbs, TVs especially, thermostats, everything is smart, and therefore everything has a computer that is storing data, and there's evidence in that data for stuff. So it's a huge field. It's, of course, very complicated to handle all those devices. And there's a whole field of hardware hacking. We'd like to have a course in this. I have a friend who's a specialist in it and knows it, but we haven't had the opportunity to hire any new teachers to teach any new courses around here. It's a shame because IoT hacking is real interesting. You can suck the firmware off the device. You can reverse engineer it and figure out how it works. You can break through the security measures on a device by glitching the power supply and things like that. There's a lot of cool things you can do to break into Internet of Things devices. But anyway, from a forensic examination, they're just like cell phones, really. They're little devices with some storage and some networking, typically. And you can search for insecure devices in a particular area with Shodan. Shodan is the internet search engine that has what versions of devices and software are running. Alexa is on the smart speakers. I think it's the Amazon smart speaker, and it turns out that it does have audio files, so they can record what has been heard in that area for a while. So that can be done. You can put microchips under your skin. As far as I know, a friend that did this. A few people like to do this. It's just a way to have like a RFID card that you don't have to remember and carry. You can have it implanted on your skin. That's not that normal. Most other people have like a card in their wallet, like a common access card or something. And your fitness trackers and Apple Watches, a lot of people wear these, and therefore they're tracking everywhere they go. So the evidence where they've been there. One thing I learned about if you're on an Apple Watch, I was taking a walk in the real high heat last summer, and it decided it didn't like my heart rate, and it freaked out and offered to call a hospital. Analyzing, I was really hot and climbing uphill and stuff. So anyway, it's watching everything you do and even making decisions like that. All right. Then you got cameras like GoPros, and a lot of people have dashboard cameras. I don't know how many people in America have them. I know a lot of people have them in Russia. But I think a lot of people have in America too, a dashboard camera to record everything that happens on their car. And of course, the police are now wearing cameras most of the time. There is a lot of resistance among police to this. They often turn off the cameras. The police departments often hold the footage and don't let people see them because, of course, there are so many cases of something awful happening, like the Rodney King beating, and it proves that the police were doing the wrong thing, and they really would rather cover that up than admit it. But anyway, there is quite a lot of evidence there being collected, and a lot of people have drones going around doing aerial photographs everywhere. In China, they say they have smart glasses that scan faces. This is something, the original Google glasses that came out maybe 8 years ago, they advertised that you could go to a party, meet somebody, and right up here it would recognize them, tell you their income, tell you their criminal record, so you totally know everything about everybody you were looking at. They advertised that as a feature, and then they found out that people didn't want that. That was too invasive. But the fact is the technology has existed for at least 8 years, maybe 10 years to do that. And apparently in China, they don't have any compunctions about using it. In America, the privacy consequences are so bad they keep turning these things off and trying to hide them and limiting how they're used because people will freak out when everybody can find out everything about you by just looking at your face and stalk you and stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of pressure for this, and the Amazon Ring devices are big ones. The smart doorbell that records everything that happens outside your house, and they originally highly encouraged Ring owners to send all that data to the police. So the police could easily get a recording of everybody been walking around in neighborhoods so they could catch burglars and stuff. Then a bunch of people thought that was too invasive, and I'm not quite sure the current status of that. But it is certainly something the police would like, to just have cameras everywhere that they can easily get at. Anyway, all right. Police vehicles are now sort of like Teslas. They're smart cars. They have like a tablet in there, and they're constantly in contact with the internet and looking things up. And so they communicate. Cellular vehicle to everything is a 3GPP standard. This is a vehicle-to-vehicle communication. So it lets them communicate to the internet, even from a moving car. Your car itself is all full of smart devices that are all keeping track of things, how fast you're going, your physical location, the maps, things you look up, and all sorts of other things. So these infotainment systems are very smart. They know what phones have been connected and stuff like that. So there's a lot of information there to be gathered. And of course, there's other ways to do it. If the only thing you can do if you get fed up with this, if you're trying to find high-tech devices, dogs can find them because electronics have chemicals with a certain smell. So you can train dogs just like you train dogs to find explosives or drugs. There are dogs that find electronics. So little electronic devices everywhere. And of course, one of the big things is the AirTag now. These little things the size of a nickel that you can put and track anybody anywhere. These are used to stalk people, to hunt them down, to find your lost luggage, and for just almost everything. Anyway, that's the modern world. Tons of evidence everywhere. And that's why the privacy people keep saying when the cops try to get rid of encryption, because they say we can't get the data, they say you can get so much data. The fact that I can encrypt my instant messages doesn't mean you can't find some data. There's so many other piles of data sitting around for you to get, so the argument goes back and forth. Anyway, that's it for this lecture. I'm going to